Whether it's because of fear, arrogance, or just bad writing, horror movie characters are known to make terrible decisions which often lead to themselves or others being brutally killed. Maybe it's just one bad decision, or maybe it's an entire movie's worth of mistakes that lead to their demise. I'm Jordan Cant, and today we're going to find out who could have survived Saw 2. And I don't know if you can hear that, but my dad is doing some work with a hammer. So that might be loud for the video. I'm sorry, it's the only time I can film it this week. Now, before I start, let's set some ground rules. Rule 1. I will not consider a character's survival based on pure luck or information that they had no way of knowing at the point of their demise. Rule 2. If a character's death was based on the decisions of another character, I will still only be considering their survival based on the decisions they themselves could have made to survive. Rule 3. I will only take into account external factors that the character had a level of control over, such as items it would be reasonable to assume they had access to throughout the movie. Saw 2 was released in 2005 and directed and co-written by Darren Lynn, with help from Lee Winnell, our favourite overactor from the first movie. I remember seeing Saw 2 and thinking what I saw was the first Saw, but actually I think that I might have seen Saw 2 first, and that although the box said Saw, it was in fact Saw 2 that I saw. Basically, I think this is the first Saw movie that I ever saw. Also, one of the deaths in this movie is one of the 2 deaths in the whole franchise that actually inspired me to make this series. I remember being a young teenager thinking I was very clever and working this one out, so I am quite excited to share that in the video. It'll be in the next video. Saw 2 opens with a light bulb slowly flashing between credits and continues into a first-person view of a room which seems very much like a room that someone would play a game in. Oh, and would you look at that? Saw 2 ain't here to play around. An arm is seen as it turns a mirror to reveal that we are seeing what Michael is seeing, which unfortunately for him is a pretty sore-looking eye and a scary-looking mechanism on his face. He is understandably freaked out, and we are treated to a noise which instantly made me decide that I wouldn't be watching this movie with earphones. He scrambles to his feet and rushes about, but realizes that his trap has a cord attached to it and doesn't instantly make the same mistake as Amanda and walk too far away and cause it to release early. Our favorite puppet boy appears on a screen and basically says that this man spends his life profiting off of watching others, and that he has a trap which will snap shut, sending many spikes into his skull, killing him. He gets a hint as to where the key is by getting shown an X-ray image showing exactly where the key is, and we learn it is behind his eye. In a rage, he starts throwing things about and yanks at the cable until it comes loose and activates the timer. He has 60 seconds to use a small blade to cut through his eye and get the key to unlock the trap and remove it from his head. He spends a while trying to muster up the mental strength to do this, but cannot cut through his eye, and eventually the trap shuts on his head. Michael is dead. So not even 5 minutes into this film and I have someone to try and save. Now this one is tricky because there are many different possibilities which potentially could lead to Michael's survival, but due to the manic camera use and darkness of the room, it is hard to know the specifics of the trap other than what Michael is told. But this doesn't mean Michael couldn't know more than we do, and of course he can easier see around the room and also has access to a mirror, and so can study the mechanism on his head much more than the audience can. But I am not one to use excuses, even though I just used a bunch of excuses, and so I am going to watch this scene over many times in slow motion to try and learn as much as I can about the trap. So what could Michael have done to survive this trap? Before I get to the options, I am going to say that all of the options would be considering if Michael didn't pull the wire out at the start, because he is explicitly told that pulling the wire will activate the trap, and so knows to not do that if he wants to give himself more time to work out what to do. But I am also going to try and come up with solutions that I believe are possible within a minute, so that the wire situation isn't as pinnacle to his survival. Don't know if pinnacle was the right word, but I've committed to using it, so there you go. Option 1. Now, this is a plain and simple answer, and it clearly didn't work for Michael, but it could work for someone else with more grit and determination. But Michael could have just cut the key out from behind his eye and unlocked the trap. As Billy the puppet explains, not even 2 hours have passed since the key was placed behind the eye. And also, as we can see, Michael's eye is still there and at least semi-functional, as we notice it can move. This means that the muscles around the eye have not been severed, and if he can still see, then the optic nerve has also not been severed, as that is what carries the visual images we see to the brain. All of this, and also evident from the location of the damage on Michael's face, shows that the key is actually slightly below the eye. Now, this means that it wasn't pushed too far back, and it certainly isn't behind the eye, but given the bone structure around the eye socket, you would almost certainly not be able to remove a key from under the eye without tweezers. And although we don't see clearly the content of the toolkit, it is likely that there are not tweezers. And so a large enough opening would have to have been made in Michael's face for his fingers to fit in to retrieve the key. Meaning, if Michael were to retrieve the key, then he would definitely badly damage his eye. But given that the wound is slightly below his eye and still fresh on his face, it wouldn't be a bad attempt to try and cut and retrieve the key simply from going through that access point. And of course he might not be able to get the key this way, but seeing that he was unable to commit to cutting through his eye, this is certainly a better option for which he could at least attempt to get the key without the risk of losing his eye. Now, as I said before, this could certainly work with someone who was more determined, but I do think you have to be some type of crazy to commit to cutting through your eye, retrieving a key from behind it, and then unlocking a trap, all within 60 seconds. But considering this timer didn't start till the cord was pulled, given more time, I think it's possible for someone to manage all that. Option 2. Now, this isn't as simple as we don't know the full mechanics of the trap, and it is hard to say if this would work, but looking closely at the trap, it seems that there are only 3 padlocks attached to it, and they are all placed on the front of the trap. One holds the harness around the torso shut, and 2 lock the trap to the harness with leather straps in between. Now, since I can see no other locks, it can be assumed that the key must work on one or all of these, and that to succeed, he must unlock them, and in doing so, he would be able to remove the helmet. Now, within 60 seconds, this second method would require a lot of strength and precision, but with no time limit at all, this would be quite an easy option and wouldn't have to involve any eyeballs or keys. If Michael could reach the blade without activating the timer, then he could cut through the thin pieces of leather that are attached to the piece on his torso, and in doing so he would be able to lift the mechanism over his head, saving him. He could also take off his underwear to increase his reach distance slightly if the box was just out of reach. Or I suppose he could have used the chair or something else in the room too, which would probably have been easier. I swear I just look at the things that are immediately to the access of the victim, and often that means their clothes and how their clothes can be used. Look, I don't need to explain myself, okay? If there was no way to reach the blade without activating the timer, then he would likely not have enough time to cut through all 4 sections of leather. This would also require the trap to have a wide enough gap to fit his head out of, which at this angle, it doesn't look like there is. However, it is hard to see how much space he has behind his head, and with the torso belt detached from the rest of the helmet, he would be able to rotate the trap, potentially finding a way to better squeeze his head out. Now, this option again is certainly possible and is potentially more likely and easier than option 1, but with a less certain outcome than acquiring the key, I can't say with certainty that this would be Michael's best choice. Option 3. Now, if any of you have seen the other films, then you will know what I am seeking inspiration from. But if Michael could find any way to block the trap or use something as a buffer for when it closes, then he could just allow the trap to be activated, and then after it has been activated, focus on removing it. If, when the trap is half closed, there is more space for his head to leave, which from the look of the design is probably true, then there are possibly several ways in which he could allow the trap to activate enough to squeeze his head out and then remove it. I would say that looking around the room, there's several items that he could probably use, but the easiest or maybe most obvious option, to me anyway, would be to smash the TV screen, removing as much from the inside as you could. I have no idea what's inside one of them box TVs, I'm not gonna lie, so this totally couldn't work. Totally might not work. I also don't have a clue how to speak good English, anyway. And I would stick my head in it before the trap closes, and depending on how sturdy the frame of the TV is, then the trap would not close completely, and when it is lodged around the TV frame, you could hopefully slide your head out. This, of course, depends on the mechanism and structure of the helmet, but as you can see from this shot, it does seem like there is possibly some more space, but maybe not quite enough to fit the head through. Unfortunately, option 3 is also an option which I can't say for sure would save Michael. And so out of these 3 options, I definitely can say that all 3 are possible with different circumstances, but considering we don't know the mechanisms and structure of the trap and we can't see everything in the room around Michael, it is hard to determine whether any of these could guarantee a survival. Knowing that option 1 is the only guaranteed way to escape the trap, and considering that Michael clearly just didn't have the mental grit and determination to do it, I think someone else could potentially have escaped this trap if they were crazy enough to succeed in cutting their eye and getting the key. But unfortunately for Michael could not have survived. Michael lies dead on the floor, with blood pouring out of the mask as the title of the movie tentatively fades onto and then off of the screen, as if it is scared to remind the audience that we didn't get a cool extra tagline to go along with the title, other than "Who?" in Roman numerals, to be fair, but still. We are then introduced to our new lead detective on the case, Eric Matthews, who is collecting his son Daniel from the police station as he was arrested for stealing something which has left a mystery to the audience. A heated family discussion ends in Daniel storming off saying he would rather stay with his mom, and is quickly followed by Eric leaving voice messages to his son who hasn't been answering his phone. Detective Matthews is called into work, and a strange but smooth scene transition leads Matthews to our favorite survivor detective who just wasn't in the majority of the first movie, Detective Carrie. Carrie says that they have found a body in another warehouse somewhere and that she thinks Matthews can identify the body as they believe it to be one of his informants. Informants? 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 I don't know how to say that word. It is, of course, the body of Michael, and they find the trademark jigsaw piece removed from the body and so know that it was likely the jigsaw killer. After a lot of heavy passive-aggressive dialogue between Matthews and Carrie, Matthews sees a message written above him saying, "Look closer, Detective Matthews," and we find out that Daniel and his wife separated because of an affair he had with Carrie. Ah, that explains all the passive aggression. Detective Matthews goes into his mind palace, which makes his body move in weird ways as he thinks about the warehouse from the first movie. The squad all gang together with many heavily armed officers charging inside the warehouse in search of one John Kramer, who is casually enjoying a spot of lunch. As they split up and search for clues, one group gets trapped in a stairwell and is greeted by a bicycle-riding Billy who laughs at them as the stairs give way, activating a trap, snapping one guy's shins as the other two panic and grab the cage walls, which electrocute and kill them. I think it's good to point out now that any characters like this, any nameless Goonies that were clearly just added to the film for a sort of shock factor or just to tally up more gore or deaths, I won't really be trying to analyze how they could survive, because simply they were added to the film to die, not added to the film as clever characters trying to survive. But yeah, they totally could have survived if they had been slightly cleverer or more careful, but it's not really fun to pick apart scenes like this, because again, they're only added to make the horror or the violence or the gore more prevalent, and I don't want to ruin horror films by pointing out every background character that could have survived, because where's the fun in that? Once the trap is activated, Baker Team is called upon for backup, and the whole squad now more cautiously investigate the building. Without further issue, they find Kramer with a bunch of medical equipment and supplies surrounding him, and Detective Matthews tries to do an intimidate as Kramer reveals he has another game to be played. A game which sees the involvement of Daniel, Matthew's son, along with a group of misfits who have about 2 hours to escape their game before more slow-acting poison kills them. Man, this guy loves his slow-acting poison. I understand its use, but like, the slow-acting poison thing just feels like a writer was like, right, we need a reason that they're under a time pressure, and then there's just this one guy sat in the corner of the writer's room just like, slow-acting poison, and they're just like, ooh, brilliant, and they just go with it every time. This isn't the first or last time. In fact, I think it came in the last film. It was in the last film, and this is certainly not the last time we will hear about this slow-acting poison. But I suppose at least they have a reason for time pressure, you know? Makes it slightly more thrilling, although I think there are better ways to do it. Kramer tells Matthew,
"Tell me where he is."
"He's in a safe place."
As long as he is willing to have a nice wee sit-down chat with him. Oh, also, this other guy is Officer Daniel Riggs, who isn't very relevant in this film, but is someone you should remember. Matthew spills one single tear on the computer, which seems to fix the monochrome filter that's being used on the camera footage. Oh, wait, no, that was just a transition, and we are now in a dark and dusty room filled with a bunch of new characters. So we have Wakey Wakey, it's time to get up guy, assertive but impulsive girl, token shy girl that seems out of place, possibly already drunk businessman, attractive but intimidating muscle tattoo guy, sleepy boy, sleepy girl, and Daniel. Hey wait, that's one of my favorite two members of Smith & Pyle. It's Amanda, and she's had a haircut. Since she's an expert at this point, and while the others stand about arguing, she finds a tape within seconds of being awake, and they all listen on, learning the conditions of their game. A few important things to note are the doors to the building will open in 3 hours, but without an antidote they will die in roughly 2 due to a deadly nerve agent that they are breathing. There is one antidote in the safe in the room, with the combination being numbers that are in the back of their mind, and clues to the order can be found over the rainbow. Once they realize what they have in common, they will get a better understanding of why they are there. And of course, X marks the spot for that clue. Along with the tape was a key and a note which specifically says don't use the key on the door. Our characters decide that that means use the key on the door, and Gus, our businessman, steps up to the task. He looks through the peephole while turning the key, which triggers a gun to fire, shooting him through the head. Okay, so our first of the crew is dead, and this one is gonna be a challenge for me. Not. He doesn't use the key. That's how he survives. The note says don't use the key. He knows explicitly not to use the key, and yeah, they're scared. They don't know if the note's telling the truth. But come on now, at least be more cautious as you use the key after being told don't use the key. Again, I think this one was more included for the shock factor, similar to the Nameless Goons, because although we do have this character's name and do get a bit of backstory about him, he was clearly kind of just added so that the rest of the characters could go, oh, this is a life or death scenario and we're gonna die and this is all true because this guy just got shot in the face. I think it's very safe to assume that nearly anyone else in this situation would have been more cautious. I also just do not understand why he was looking through the peephole as he turned the key. If the peephole was so that you could see through it, then he would have seen the gun and known not to turn the key. And if the peephole was facing the other way, which I assume it was, otherwise he would have seen the gun, then he wouldn't have really been able to see anything at all. So why even look through it as you open the door? If you know that there's some reason not to open the door, whether it's because you're being lied to and that you're supposed to open it and it's a double bluff, or whether it's because you're actually not supposed to open the door, as with Amanda explaining and the rules of the game explaining, you still don't look through the keyhole as you open it. You definitely try and go to the side or try and do it from a distance or something. It was definitely added for shock factor, and I do like the death. I think it's cool. I think it's a good level of gory while also quick and shocking, but I think it's safe to say with this one that Gus could have survived. The group panic and quickly turn against Amanda, who seems a bit too clever, and she reveals to them that they are in one of Jigsaw's games and need to win to survive, which she proves she knows because she shows them a flashback. I mean, tells them that she has played before. Tobin Bell is creepy and cool and again asks to chat with Matthews alone, and Carrie convinces him is the best way to buy time. Back to the squad in the house, and after searching for clues for a while and finding nothing, the door with the gun behind it just swings open after I believe a timer hits 0, so I guess their first game was to just sit in that room and wait. To be fair, they did get told some clues which, had they spent the time trying to work out, they could already be one antidote up, but anyway. They leave the room, and Jonas, our wakey it's time to get up guy, and Xavier, our muscly tattoo guy, fight like my favorite Disney couple, with Xavier deciding he's got to go his own way and find an antidote to get out. The group kind of just follow him though, and find a door with the word exit on it. Xavier cautiously opens the door with the key, and by cautiously I mean he leans in front of the other door instead of going on the other side and opening it while it's mostly behind a wall. But the key does not work, and we are now back to Detective Matthews, who has decided to chat with Kramer while hiding his walkie-talkie so Carrie can hear it all too. The conversation is a lot of cryptic messages from Kramer and sassy clapbacks from Eric as Kramer suggests he knows about the detective's past. The conversation ends with our righteous man Kramer asking for a refill on his water, and wait, what's that? Kramer, how could you? A plastic straw! I thought you were all about the value of life and stuff. Back to the house is Xavier. Xavier? I'm going with Xavier. Xavier. Back to the house as Xavier smashes the door down with a bat to find it has metal shutters behind it and it is not going to be a route for escape. The rest of the group seems to just sit about and watch as this happens, wasting even more precious time as Addison has already started coughing up blood. Jonas starts asking some questions that might lead them somewhere when Laura finds a hidden door which leads them to a new room and a new game. The game that is meant for Obi, with a tape that describes how grateful Jigsaw is that Obi helped kidnap all these people. He is so grateful, in fact, that he has kindly left not only one, but 2 antidotes in a totally safe and definitely not trapped supersize oven. The main 2 clues in the tape are that one antidote is fine to take for free, but the other will come with a price, and that once you are in hell, only the devil can help you. Now, this game was designed for Obi, but in theory anyone could have played instead of him. However, they are understandably all pissed discovering that Obi helped put them in this mess, and so he doesn't get much choice in the matter. Obi enters the oven and gets the first antidote with no problems, but as he pulls on the second antidote, the door to the oven slams shut and starts to fill with flames. The others scramble to help him as he, or maybe just the audience, see a devil pointing at a valve handle with the instruction twist. I'm going to assume he didn't see it, otherwise surely he would have just twisted it. But although the others managed to smash the glass on the other side of the oven, it is not a wide enough gap for Obi to fit through, and he is trapped in the oven until he burns alive. This is the second Saw film in a row where the second real proper game of the film ends in immolation. Fun fact for you. So, for Obi to survive and both antidotes to be acquired, I have two options. Now, option one is quite boring and simple, and it feels a bit cheap to even use it as an option, but had he properly listened to his tape and realized the dangers he would have been in, he would have been more cautious when entering the oven, he would have looked around and probably noticed the valve earlier, and he would also have just known how to more safely acquire both the antidote, knowing to turn the valve when it was at the point of burning him. And yeah, he would have been able to escape, but again, it feels quite cheap to use that, but it is certainly an option he could have used to survive. Option 2, however, would require a bit more time and a bit more thinking and a bit more caution, but it would mean that both antidotes could potentially have been got without ever having to enter the oven in the first place. Looking at the size of the oven, it is definitely hard to say if this is going to be possible, but I'm going to assume it is. Which is, if Obby can fit his arm and head through the glass, then he can likely reach quite far, definitely far enough into the oven from the other side of the glass. If he was to smash the glass using the same method Xavier used and reach through the gap, he could reach the antidotes all while easily exiting the oven again from the glass. If he couldn't fit both arms, we do know for sure he could fit his shoulder, arm, and head, and so I'm confident in saying that a smaller member, such as Daniel or more likely Addison, would definitely be able to fit much more of herself through the gap, and possibly even be able to climb entirely through the gap. We can't say for sure that anyone would be willing to help, but with the prospect of an antidote being offered to whoever helps, I think Addison would probably have done it. Obby was impulsive and didn't think about his tape, or the fact that they had already encountered several traps in the building. Had he stopped to assess the situation, he probably would have discovered an easier way to obtain the antidotes without risking his own life. Now, I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt here, as he was under a lot of stress and being verbally and physically assaulted by everyone else in the room when they learned that he kidnapped them, and so he was hardly given the chance to consider his tape, to take in his surroundings, or think of any other method before he was essentially forced into the oven. And so, I think considering all those factors, other than the obvious, which was turn the valve, which I'm just going to assume he didn't see, he probably couldn't have survived, and so Obby could not have survived. However, anyone else with less pressure on them and the time to examine the whole situation could probably have quite easily survived, with someone particularly small like Addison for sure being able to escape through the glass, probably. That would make sense. And so I'm going to stop at the halfway point here, and the rest of the film will continue in the next episode of the series. If you like what you saw, then please do hit the like button, and if you are new to the channel, then please do stick around by clicking that subscribe button. If you disagree with any of my opinions, have your own ideas of how people could have survived, or maybe just want to say hi, then put it down in the comments below. And if you're looking for something a little bit more lighthearted, then check out the other series on my channel where me and my friends show you what we get up to on a weekly basis in a vlog. Be kind and stay safe, and thank you for watching. Could they have survived? Saw 2.